In the village of Umuozala, where the red earth baked under the sun and women carried calabashes on their heads with the grace of queens, there lived a girl named Amarachi. She was not the kind of girl who sang by the riverbank with other maidens. She did not laugh too loudly or sway her waist at village dances. She moved like a shadow, quiet, watchful, and always alone. Some called her proud. Others whispered that she had a spirit husband. But the truth was simple. Amarachi did not want to be hurt. Her mother had been a beautiful woman, the type whose smile could melt even the hardest palm wine tapper. But her beauty had brought her sorrow. Her father had left when Amarachi was just 5, disappearing with another woman from the next village and leaving behind silence, hunger, and shame. Amarachi had grown up watching her mother cry over pots of boiling yam, her tears adding salt to every meal. So, when Amarachi came of age and suitors began to knock on the wooden door of her late mother's hut, she said no. One after another, she turned them away. A farmer from Amizi, a trader from Ogboko, even a teacher from the city. She said no without flinching, as if her heart was a stone and not a beating thing that longed for warmth. People talked. Who does she think she is? A woman must marry, or she will rot in her father's compound. But Amarachi only listened to the silence inside her. That was until Obina came. He was not like the others. He did not speak in riddles or boast about his strength. He sat quietly with her on market days, helping her sell okra and bitter leaf. He listened when she spoke and never looked at other women when they passed by. His eyes were kind, but his voice was firm. Amarachi, I am not here to use you and throw you away. I swear on my father's grave, I will never cheat on you. I will protect your heart like it is my own. And somehow, she believed him. They married quietly. No loud music. No dancing in the village square. Just the two of them, hands locked like secrets, and a promise whispered under the moon. A year later, a daughter was born, Yagama, named after Obina's late mother. Yagama was the light Amarachi never knew she needed. The girl had eyes like the early morning sky and a laugh that softened even the deepest part of Amarachi's guarded heart. Life began to feel like something worth trusting. But joy, in Umuozala, rarely came without a price. It started with a fever. At first, they thought it was malaria. Amarachi gave her herbs, rubbed her with hot water and ojirasai leaves. But the fever worsened. Her eyes grew dim. Her small body trembled like a leaf in the wind. Obina carried her on his back from one native doctor to another, but nothing changed. Finally, they were told the truth. It was a rare illness, one that needed urgent hospital treatment in the city. Treatment that cost hundreds of thousands of naira. They had no such money. Amarachi wept until her voice was gone. She held Obina's shirt one night and shook him. Do something. Anything. I don't care what. If you let this girl die, I will never forgive you. I swear on my mother's grave. I will hate you until my last breath. Obina said nothing, but something changed in his eyes that night. A fire. A desperation. He left before the sun rose. Days passed. Then one night, he returned, breathless, muddy, shaking. Behind him stood his friend Ikenna, a man who worked as a clerk in a government office in the city. Neither spoke about where the money came from, but the very next morning, Yagama was taken to the hospital. She lived. Her laughter returned like the first rain after dry season, and for a moment, Amarachi believed in miracles again. She hugged Obina and told him he was her hero. She never asked where the money came from, but a part of her already knew. She kept it buried in the deepest corner of her mind. Until one day, she noticed Obina had changed. The rains came late that year. In Umuozala, the elders watched the sky with furrowed brows and mumbled beneath their breath that the gods were displeased. The air was heavy, like a secret waiting to be spoken. The leaves curled in on themselves. Even the goats wandered with restless eyes. Something was coming. Something no one could name. Amarachi began to notice small changes first. Obina, who once returned from work with dust on his feet and stories on his lips, now came home later and later. Some evenings, he would stand outside the compound for a long time, staring into the distance before stepping through the bamboo fence. His shirt would smell faintly of perfume, not the sweaty, sweet scent of motor parks and buses, but something more feminine, soft, and wrong. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe someone at the office hugged him. Maybe he brushed past a woman in the bus. Maybe. But lies don't sit well in a woman's chest. They fester. One night, after Yagama had slept, Amarachi lay beside her husband and listened to his breathing. It was steady, too steady. She turned to him. Obina, are you seeing another woman? He turned his face away, but not before she saw the flicker in his eyes. What kind of question is that? After everything we've been through. She didn't answer. She just looked at him. That look. The one women inherit from their mothers when they've seen too much and been told too little. That look that can cut a man's soul in half. Obina rose and left the bed without a word. Days passed. She watched him more closely now. His phone, once left carelessly on the stool, was always locked. He laughed at messages she could not see. He shaved more often. He bought a new shirt and didn't tell her. And the worst part? He began to treat her gently, but not with love, no, with caution, like a man afraid that the woman beside him knew too much. One Sunday, Amarachi followed him. She had seen the text message by accident, or perhaps it was fate. He had left the phone charging and stepped out to urinate. A message had popped up. I miss you, Obina. Come tonight. She doesn't have to know. No name, just a number. But that was enough. The rain had started to fall when he left that evening. Amarachi told him nothing. She simply kissed Yagama on the forehead, wrapped herself in her mother's old wrapper, and followed at a distance. He took a side road, one that led past the palm oil mill and toward a small, unpainted bungalow at the edge of the village. Amarachi watched from behind a tree as the door opened and a woman in a short, red gown stepped out, her smile wide, her arms welcoming. She didn't need to see more. Amarachi turned and walked home through the rain, her steps slow, her thoughts loud. That night, she did not sleep. She sat on the cold floor of her hut and stared into the kerosene lamp until the flame burned into her memory. Her mind raced back to the night of the fever, her daughter trembling in her arms, her own voice cracking as she begged Obina to find a way, any way, to save their child. He had done what she asked. He had stolen, maybe from his workplace, maybe with Ikena's help. She didn't know how, and she didn't care. But she had promised to keep it a secret, to swallow that sin like bitter medicine, because Yagama lived. But now, he had used that stolen life to chase another woman's perfume. Something shifted in her chest. Not rage, not even heartbreak. Clarity. If she had to carry the weight of that secret forever, so would he. But if he thought he could shame her in return for her silence, then he didn't know the woman he had married. The next morning, Amarachi woke early. She made yam porridge for Yagama and bathed her. She laughed and kissed her forehead, the way a good mother should. Then she waited for Obina to return from the early morning errands. When he walked through the door, she was seated, back straight, wrapper tied firmly around her chest. Sit down, she said. He blinked, then obeyed. I know everything, she began. I know about her. The red dress. The perfume. The lies. But that's not even why I called you. Obina swallowed hard. Amara, it's not what you. Don't lie. Not when your life depends on it. He froze. Amarachi leaned forward. I kept quiet when you stole. I told no one. I carried your crime like it was my own. But you, Obina, you opened your mouth and started another one. Adultery. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Amarachi stood slowly and moved to the window. The rain was falling again, steady and cold. You have two choices, she said without turning. You can leave this woman and return to your family, quietly and fully. Or, she turned to face him, her eyes hard like wet stone. I will tell the village what you and Ikena did. I will tell the police. You will go to prison. And Ikena will too. Obina's hands began to shake. No, Amara. You can't. I can. I will. He fell to his knees. Please, don't. That money saved Yagama's life. And I kept your secret for her. But now you owe me. You will end this affair tonight. You will do as I say. If not, I'll bury you both in truth. There was silence. Only the sound of the rain and the quiet sobbing of a man who thought he could eat his cake and keep it. Then Amarachi said the words that would forever change their lives. Call her. Tell her to come. To this house. He looked up, horrified. What? Amara. You heard me. Call her. Invite her here. I want to meet the woman who tried to take my husband. The sun had disappeared behind thick clouds by the time Obina picked up his phone. His hands trembled like the leaves of a bitter leaf tree in a storm. His mouth was dry, and his tongue felt heavy in his throat. But Amarachi's eyes never left him, not once. She stood with her arms folded, her back pressed against the wooden door, as though she was the gatekeeper of his judgment. Call her, she said again, her voice low and final. Obinna knew there was no escape. If he refused, she would speak. If she spoke, he would lose everything, not just his freedom, but the child he had risked it all for. The shame alone would kill his aging mother in the village. Ikena too would be ruined. The police would come. Prison walls would close in like a coffin. He dialed the number. She answered quickly. Obinna, baby, I've been waiting for you since morning. Are you coming? His voice was thick. I want you to come to the house now. A pause. To your house. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. Is your wife home? Yes, he said. But she's not angry. She said she wants to meet you. Silence again. Then laughter. Ewu. She wants to meet me? Just like that? What for? She said she wants to cook for us. As a family. To understand. Amarachi's eyes narrowed at the lie, but she said nothing. The woman on the other end of the line giggled. Okay, baby. I'm coming. Should I wear that yellow dress you like? Obinna swallowed. Wear anything you want. Just come. Her name was Ngozi, and she arrived just before sunset. She came swaying down the narrow footpath like a leaf dancing on a breeze. Her dress was tight, bright yellow like the rising sun. Her lips were painted red. Her hair bounced in curls as she walked, hips swaying, eyes full of confidence. She was beautiful, yes, but also blind. Blind to the storm waiting behind the bamboo fence. Amarachi saw her through the window and turned to Obinna. Open the door. Obinna stood like a man walking into his own funeral. He opened the wooden door slowly, forcing a smile. Ngozi beamed. My love. But before she could throw her arms around him, she saw Amarachi seated at the center of the small room, a calmness wrapped around her like a second skin. There was a small pot on the coal stove, and the smell of boiling bitterleaf soup filled the room. Ngozi hesitated. This is her? Amarachi asked, not looking up. Obinna nodded. Ngozi's voice dropped. Good evening, Ma. Sit down, Amarachi said, pointing to a wooden stool across from her. There is no need for fear. I only want to talk. Ngozi sat. Silence stretched for a long moment. The only sound was the gentle bubbling of the soup and the slow creak of the wooden stool beneath Ngozi's nervous frame. You're very beautiful, Amarachi said finally. Obinna chose well. Ngozi smiled shyly. Thank you, Ma. I didn't mean to cause. I didn't ask for apologies. Ngozi's smile disappeared. Amarachi stood and moved toward her slowly. You knew he was married, didn't you? Ngozi looked at Obinna, who refused to meet her eyes. He told me. But he said things weren't working between you two, that you didn't understand him. Amarachi laughed. A short, sharp sound like a machete slicing air. Of course he said that. That's what they all say. She walked back to the pot and stirred it gently, her back turned. When our daughter was sick, I begged him to save her. I didn't care how. I just wanted her to live. He did something terrible, to save her, and I promised to keep that terrible thing a secret. She paused, letting the words hang. But now, he has used the life I helped him protect, to chase you. Ngozi shifted in her seat. Ma, please. I didn't mean. Did he tell you he stole government money with his friend? Did he tell you he could go to prison for the rest of his life if that secret ever gets out? Did he tell you that I am the only reason he is not rotting behind iron bars? Ngozi's mouth fell open. No. Amarachi turned. Of course not. You're just his escape. Obinna sat down heavily, his eyes buried in his palms. Amarachi picked up a small knife from the shelf and walked slowly toward the pair. Ngozi stiffened. She placed the knife in Obinna's hand. He looked up in terror. What are you doing? He whispered. You have one chance to clean this mess, Amarachi said. One. If I handle it, it will be louder. Messier, you think people won't ask questions if a strange woman's body is found floating in the river? But if it disappears completely? If no one sees it? Ngozi stood up suddenly. Are you mad? You want him to kill me? You already killed my piece, Amarachi said, stepping closer. Now it's your turn to choose. She turned to Obinna, voice ice cold. Do it, or I tell the world everything. Obinna stood slowly. His hand trembled as he raised the knife. Please, Obinna, Ngozi sobbed, backing away. We can go. We can leave this village. You don't have to do this. Obinna didn't speak. The only sound in the room was the storm beginning outside, the wind howling through the cracks, the bamboo fence rattling, the clouds splitting open above. Then a scream. Then silence. They wrapped the body in old curtains. Amarachi stood by the doorway, not crying, not trembling, just breathing, slowly, like someone who had carried pain for too long and finally dropped it. They carried Ngozi's body in the dead of night, down the muddy path to the river that curved behind the cassava farms. Obinna didn't speak. He walked like a man who had lost his soul. The river was high from the rain. They pushed her in. She disappeared without a sound. By morning, Umuozala was waking to the sound of birds and the cry of traders. Nobody knew that a girl had vanished. Nobody knew what Amarachi had done. Not yet. But soon, posters would appear. Missing, Ngozi Okachukwu. Last seen in Umuozala. People would whisper. Some would search. But Amarachi and Obinna would be long gone. The bus rumbled across the narrow highway like a restless spirit fleeing from judgment. Amarachi sat by the window, her daughter asleep in her arms, her eyes gazing at the passing trees like someone searching for forgiveness between the leaves. Obinna sat beside them, silent. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, but not a word escaped his lips. He had not spoken since the night of the scream, since they pushed Ngozi into the river like an offering. Like guilt, they were headed to Amakwi, a quiet village tucked between green hills and red soil, where people minded their business and spoke in soft tones. A place far enough that no one would ask questions, far enough that Umuozala would feel like another life. They arrived just before dusk. The sky was stained orange, and the road was lined with palm trees bowing gently in the evening breeze. A small compound with an old mud house sat waiting, rented quietly under a false name through a friend of a friend. No questions, no paperwork. They began again. New names, new stories. Obinna became Chike. Amarachi became Adiz. Their daughter, already recovering well, answered to Neka. She was too young to remember the shadows. They lived quietly. Obinna found work at a local mechanic's shop. Amarachi sold vegetables in front of their small house. People in Amakwi called them the quiet family. No one suspected anything. But peace does not come easily to people who feed rivers with secrets. It started with the dream. At first, Amarachi dismissed it as the usual nonsense, the mind twisting its memories into ghosts while the body rests. But the third night, she woke up drenched in sweat, her throat sore from screaming. In the dream, Ngozi stood by the riverbank, water dripping from her long yellow dress. Her eyes were open, mouth twisted in a terrible smile. "You said it was over," she whispered in the dream. "But water never forgets." Amarachi jerked awake and screamed so loud her daughter began to cry. Obinna rushed into the room, eyes wild. "What is it?" She looked at him with trembling lips. "She was here, by the river," she said. "Water never forgets." Obinna didn't speak. He turned and walked back into the dark hallway like a man who had stopped believing in sleep. Then the whispers began. At the stream in Amakwi, women began talking about a strange girl who sometimes appeared by the water's edge just before sunset. She didn't fetch water. She didn't greet anyone. She just stood there, staring, with her yellow dress fluttering like mist. They said her eyes were red like firewood embers, and her feet didn't touch the ground. Children who saw her came home shivering. Some refused to return to the stream at all. One old woman swore she saw the girl vanish into the water like a stone. "Huh, this is not ordinary," she muttered to others. "This one is spirit." Spirit. Amarachi avoided the stream. She fetched water early, when the sun was just waking up and the air was still thick with dew. But each time she walked past the tall trees by the footpath, she felt eyes watching her, breathing behind her, waiting. Then came the knock. One rainy night, Obinna and Amarachi sat in silence, their daughter fast asleep between them. The wind howled outside like a mourning widow. Thunder clapped in the distance. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks on the wooden door. Obinna froze. "Did you hear that?" Amarachi didn't answer. "Knock, knock, knock." Obinna stood up slowly, heart pounding. He opened the door. There was no one there. Only a trail of wet footprints leading away from the doorstep, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The next day, news spread. A fisherman's boat had been found smashed near the edge of the river. No body, just blood, and a torn piece of yellow cloth clinging to the reeds. The village priest was called. Sacrifices were made. Incantations muttered. Still, the river did not rest. 1 week later, Obinna came home late. His shirt was torn, his body scratched, his eyes wild with terror. Amarachi rushed to him. What happened? I saw her, he whispered. Where? At the junction. I was crossing the road. And there she was, standing beside a palm tree. That yellow dress. That red mouth. Amarachi, she looked right at me. And she said, choose now, your peace or your punishment. Amarachi stared at him, face pale. We have to leave. Tonight. Now. But it was too late. That night, their daughter woke up screaming. Amarachi ran to her side. She was in my room, the little girl cried. Auntie with red eyes. She was here. Obina grabbed his bags. Amarachi held her daughter tightly. They ran into the rain, barefoot, clothes soaked, breath fast. But the night was longer than they expected. As they reached the edge of the village, by the narrow bridge that overlooked the wide river, the rain stopped. A figure stood in the middle of the bridge, waiting. Ngozi. Her dress was wet, clinging to her skin. Her eyes were fire. Her voice was wind. You ran. But water remembers. Obina dropped his bag, fell to his knees. Please, please, we did it for our daughter. I didn't want to. You chose me. She lifted one pale hand. Amarachi screamed. The wind howled. The bridge cracked. Obina screamed as he fell forward. The water swallowed him, just like it had swallowed her. The next morning, villagers gathered at the river. The body of a man floated silently near the banks. They didn't know his name. They didn't know his story. But Amarachi did. She sat by the river, her daughter in her arms, her eyes empty. They asked her questions. She didn't speak. The priest came. He said the gods were angry. But Amarachi knew it wasn't the gods. It was a woman, a girl, a ghost. It was Ngozi. And the water? The water never forgets.